I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, the start of a new college season with serious concerns about the well-being of Jewish students on campus. On JBS, we've been addressing the extent to which the BDS movement, which seeks to institute boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, has infiltrated many colleges and universities across America, intimidating Jewish students with verbal and sometimes even physical abuse, stifling free speech while vilifying Israel. Well, many in the Jewish community are speaking out against this bigotry and hate, what many call now today's new anti-Semitism. And there are those who are seeking to provide Jewish students with the tools necessary to defend themselves and to defend the state of Israel. And one individual in the forefront of efforts to help Jewish young people on campus is the highly regarded Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, JTS, the conservative movement's rabbinical school in New York, Arnie Eisen. And I'm most pleased to have Arnie on our phones right now. Arnie, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here, Mark.
Arnie, you wrote a superb opinion piece, which is entitled, "Jewish Pride on Campus is Under Siege. Here's what your kids can do to fight back." I know you're keenly aware of the bigotry against Israel on college campuses, but I want to know what prompted you to write this piece at this particular time.
Well, Mark, JTS is not just a rabbinical school and a cantorial school and a graduate school of education. We have an undergraduate program, List College. We've got about 200 kids who study at JTS along with being at Barnard or Columbia. And they reported back to me last spring what they were up against at Barnard and Columbia, how there are faculty teaching anti-Israel in the classroom, and they're encountering all sorts of student groups who are fiercely anti-Israel. And Jewish student groups are being shut out of cooperation with other student groups on campus who tell them that if you're going to stand up for Israel, you can't be part of our programs. And so they came to me, the students came to me and said, you got to write something that expresses your point of view clearly. And that's why I did it.
It was courageous of you, very well written. I did not know that backstory. That's fascinating. By the way, I'm a Columbia graduate. The idea, Arnie, that Columbia and Barnard now have such a strong BDS presence on campus that Jewish students would be intimidated. Arnie, I find that staggering.
And I don't know that it's particularly unusual at Columbia or Barnard. There are students all over the country, and this is a common problem on American campuses. And I follow the news as you do, and also I get anecdotal reports from friends of mine who are Jewish studies professors around the country. And I'll tell you, the response to this piece has been incredible, and we're getting responses from students and faculty all across the country.
Well, good for you.
And this is a common problem. This is everywhere. You've got a highly organized BDS constituency. And I think what happened was 2 or 3 years ago, we were taken unawares. We, the Jewish institutions of America and the Hillels and the Jewish student groups were taken by surprise. But now I think we're ready with responses, and there was a lot of response last year, and I expect this is going to continue this year.
I think you're absolutely right. Look, you write about what you call the big lie when it comes to Israel. Arnie, what's the big lie being promulgated by the BDS movement?
The big lie is what links Israel in a one-sided, kind of black and white fashion to colonialism, to genocide, to apartheid. And these are, of course, exaggerations. And also it's one-sided in the sense that the big lie is that the stall in the peace process is solely the responsibility of Israel and its government, with no responsibility whatsoever on the Palestinian side. So it's presented as a black and white, right and wrong situation without any subtlety. And this lie that Israel came in and stole everything from its rightful owners, et cetera, a simplistic picture at the very moment when, as I write, the Middle East is up in flames, and you have 400,000 dead in Syria, and you have terrorism all over the place, and to say that Israel, and Israel alone, is responsible for the world's problems or the Middle East problems, That's what I'm calling the big lie.
Good for you. Arnie, JTS students study in Israel as part of the program, correct?
That's absolutely right.
What feedback do you get from them about when they leave America to go to Israel for a while? I'm sure many of them have been to Israel before, but now they're going with a JTS program. Then they come back. What do you sense in terms of their own growth? What do you sense in terms of their connection to Israel because they've spent a year there or more?
You know, the experience of JTS students going to Israel is they always come back feeling closer to Israel, passionately involved in Israel, and that's irregardless of their political opinions. And that's one of the points I wanted to make in this article.
Yes.
Israelis have all sorts of point of view about Israel. American Jews have all sorts of points of view about Israel. So let's not equate having a different point of view than the current government of Israel with being anti-Israel. And let's not, on the other side, let these students feel that just because they disagree with a certain government policy, they can't be connected to Israel. So when you come back from Israel, you love the place and the people and the dilemmas and even the problems. You come back loving the problems. And that's what we find, and that's why we want all of our future leaders to spend significant time in Israel. And therefore, it doesn't matter when they come back where they stand on the political spectrum. They come back loving Israel and passionately involved in Israel, and they can transmit that love for Israel to their communities.
That's wonderful. I also raised this question with you because we have seen on the American scene, there are rabbis who are very critical of Israel, and within the liberal wing of the Jewish community of America, there are rabbis who, I'm not saying that they're sympathetic to BDS, Arnie, but they speak in a way that only is about criticism. I want to know what you've experienced through the Rabbinical Assembly's rabbinic body. That's the body of conservative rabbis here in America. But what is your sense of how the conservative rabbinate deals with the serious dilemmas, the issue of Jewish pluralism or not enough Jewish pluralism in Israel, the two-state solution and not the two-state solution? In general, can you tell us anything about the way you feel the conservative rabbinate is handling the entire issue of Israel, especially as it applies to BDS?
Yes, and you know, I'm not a spokesman for the Rabbinical Assembly, but in my work, thankfully, every day I have contact with conservative rabbis. I had lunch with one yesterday, and I can tell you that almost to a person, they became rabbis out of love for the Jewish tradition, which is involved with love for Israel. Every single one of them has had experiences like I have, which transformed them on the ground in Israel, so that their love of Judaism is wrapped up in love for Israel. Again, there's lots of different political points of view, but they're all involved with Israel in a very deep way. So I think I can say here what we hope to achieve here is a dialogue about Israel and the American Jewish community that is, number one, loving, number two, well-informed, number three, honest, and number four, civil. Let's learn as American Jews to talk to each other civilly about Israel in a way that's really loving. And I don't want anybody to feel like they have to leave the community, God forbid, or become an outlier, and certainly not a student, just because of their points of view here. And one of the problems with BDS, framing it in a black and white way, is that sometimes the Jewish community responds in a black and white way, and you're either with us or you're against us. And I'm trying to say, no, we got Jewish hearts and souls and minds to protect here. Let's get those kids around the table that are Jewish tables and teach them about their history and about their tradition and make them proud. And the rabbis, I think, to a person, are leading the way on that.
That is lovely. But you say it so well, and I'm a big fan of yours, Arnie. I think what you're doing and what you've done since coming to JTS has been extraordinary. We've had you on, not in the news, but we've covered many of your events, and I show you all the time on JBS.
That's great. Thank you.
There are few people who are able to say it as you do, and you've never compromised intellectually, but you've argued consistently that the Jewish community should not be at odds, that we have the ability and the right to disagree with each other and still be, to use your word, civil. And it's so important that our audience hear you say that, and I just wanted you to know how appreciative I am of your making that point here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. I want to come back to your article again, your opinion piece. You make a superb point when you write that most students, they don't really ever see what the BDS movement is committed to, and few Jews will ever visit the BDS movement website. You point out that if we did visit the BDS website, we'd learn what the BDS movement is really trying to accomplish vis-a-vis the state of Israel. From your perspective, what does the BDS movement website prove to you about the BDS movement?
Well, I just urge everyone, not to take my word for it. Just go to the site yourself and see what's there. And I was kind of shocked because I thought it would be sort of more academic and even in terms of its appeal, try to be more broad-minded, but not a single word, of course, of criticism of any Palestinian organization, a purely good versus evil portrayal of the thing. All sorts of West Bank journalists and residents report regularly about the corrupt Palestinian Authority. You wouldn't learn about that on the BDS website. You would not learn anything about the nature of Hamas and what they've done in Gaza on the BDS website. And it's clear that what BDS wants is the return of all the refugees and a secular democratic state which ceases to be a Jewish state, and it's the end of the state of Israel as we know it.
Yes.
I don't see any way that one can interpret their rhetoric and their language and their arguments in any way other than the fact that they want the end of the state of Israel as a Jewish state. And I make the further point, we Jews should be careful about using the word anti-Semitism, and not everybody who criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic. But I'm firm in the belief, and I try to say this in the article, so let me say it here, that when you hold the state of Israel up to a standard that you hold no other state up to, and when you say that our right to exist as a Jewish state, or indeed as a Jewish people, depends on a degree of moral perfection that you don't demand of any other people or any other state, that's anti-Semitism. That has a long tradition behind it. So we don't get to exist unless we are morally perfect, whereas the failings of every other state, which are much greater than the state of Israel, are passed over in silence. So not a word criticizing Saudi Arabia, not a word criticizing Syria, not a word criticizing Lebanon, et cetera, but Israel's faults are held up to public view. Now that's a real problem, and we have to teach our young people that they got to watch out for this, and they got to know it when they see it, and they've got to not settle for it and not allow it to happen. That's what I'm talking about in terms of Jewish pride. Be proud of what we've accomplished, but don't let anybody pull us down as if we're responsible for all the world's problems. And that's the message you get from the BDS website. It's only Israel's fault. Everything is Israel's fault.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I want to make sure everybody understands what you're saying. You are saying that while there are people who can be critical of Israel and not be anti-Semitic, you feel at the same time the BDS movement is in fact in some way has been captivated by an anti-Semitism that really wants the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel.
I think it's pretty clear they want the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel. And I think it's clear that they're demanding moral perfection of Israel, which they don't demand of anybody else. And I think that particular stance is anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. Yes. To say that our right to exist as a people or a state depends upon moral perfection, that's anti-Semitic, because nobody else is subject to that standard.
Okay. You heard me say earlier, by the way, I consider it a form of bigotry. Are you comfortable with my saying that, or would you use different words?
But that stance is a form. No, I'm quite comfortable with that. I think that, again, we want to clear the space for lots of discussion about Israel. I want Jewish kids, particularly if we go back to the subject of students, I don't want any students to stay away from Hillel because they think Hillel demands like a loyalty oath from them. I want them to be free to voice their minds, but I also want them to know their own history. And the more you know, the more reason for pride you have. I don't have any fear that Jewish students are going to learn too much about Israel or learn too much about Judaism. I want them to know who they are and know their history. And the more you know, the more reasons you have to be proud. That's my message to the Jewish students. Stand up for it yourselves. Like, know who you are. Be informed. And open your minds. Keep your minds open. I'm not calling anybody to close down their minds. On the contrary, I think the BDS is calling on people to close down their minds. We want to open Jewish minds.
Yes. But what is your biggest concern, your biggest worry? You do write about it in the piece. What do you worry the impact of the BDS movement may have on Jewish college students? What might happen?
And that's right. And I write, and let's make the negative point, too, before we make the positive point. The negative point is what I'm not afraid of. I'm not afraid of them becoming anti-Israel, and I'm certainly not afraid of universities divesting. There's no evidence that any university is going to do that, and I'm not afraid of Israeli government policy being impacted by this. So what am I afraid of? Two things. First, there's an opportunity cost. Jewish students and the people who serve them, like Hillel, have literally spent thousands and thousands of hours, and now tens and hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of dollars, fighting BDS and its divestment campaign, and that is time and money that would have gone into Jewish education and the building of Jewish communities. So there's a tremendous opportunity cost in terms of all the hours that could have been spent on fostering Jewish pride and Jewish learning and Jewish values and Jewish communities that has to be spent on fighting the BDS people. So that's an opportunity cost that is really significant, and I'm worried that we're going to keep having to do that, and that's sad. But secondly, I'm afraid that Jewish students are going to keep their heads down. Mm-hmm. Certainly they're going to do that if they're physically intimidated. We know about Jewish students who don't dare wear a kippah or a Magen David on certain campuses because they don't want to be identified as Jews. That's horrible. But even if that doesn't happen, something's going to happen inside them. And if a Jewish student starts to have doubts about the value of being Jewish or the legitimacy of standing for Jewish values, and they start like keeping their distance from Jewish organizations or causes or the Jewish community, and they lose even an ounce of pride. For a Jewish student to lose even a little bit of pride in being Jewish or being supportive of the state of Israel, which is what the greatest Jewish achievement of our day, that's sad to me. That's worrisome. That's a cost. And I think BDS is hurting us in that way. And that's why I wrote this essay as much as I could to shore up Jewish pride and let them know at least that I, as a Jewish educator, and a Jewish leader, and a Jewish scholar, I stand up proudly for Israel, certainly stand up proudly for Judaism and for Israel, and I want them to do that too.
Again, just beautifully said. What do you think parents should do? You know, your piece is really written, it says here, you know, how your kids can learn to fight back. So the suggestion is some way, at least in the title, I don't know if you wrote the title, is that it's written for people who work with kids. The piece is really written about and for students. I'm asking you a slightly different question. If you were speaking to an auditorium filled with Jewish parents who are concerned about the issues that you've enumerated here, what advice could you give them? What would you like to see, if you have any advice? What would it be to parents of Jewish students going off to college or going back to college?
Yeah, the first thing is talk to your kids, and that's good advice in any situation. Talk to your kids about why you are proud to be a Jew and why you're proud to be a supporter of Israel. I think some kids erroneously have the assumption that their parents are not thinking, like their parents settled into a habit when they were young and in college and haven't thought since, haven't had an idea since. And I want the parents to convey to their kids that, you know, they wrestle, they have doubts, they have criticism, and that criticism, those doubts, that wrestling strengthens their connection to Judaism and strengthens their connection to Israel, and they look forward to engaging their kids in that same way. The second thing I would do is buy your kids some books. Mm-hmm. You know, there are a lot of great books out there, and kids should be informed. I mean, we have a wonderful a library about Judaism, and we also have a wonderful library about Israel. And Ari Shavit's book was a notable addition to that library a couple of years ago. I mean, every Jewish kid should read that book. Anita Shapira came out with a great history of Israel a couple of years ago. My friend Michael Stanislavski just came up with a short history of Zionism that's about to be published. There are lots of really good books on the subject. And what kids want to do in college is open their minds, not shut their minds down. And they should know that their parents are fully behind this effort to open minds. We're not expecting anybody to be in lockstep support. To be a Jew, Jews are not good at lockstep support. Jews
Right.
are great at argument.
Right.
Okay, let's go, let's talk, let's argue, let's think. And that's a really good message for parents to convey to their kids as we approach the High Holy Days. It's a real privilege to be a Jew. You know, we're not walking around being superior to other people, but what a privilege it is to come from this tradition and this community that are doing such great things in the world. They're doing great things in America, and we're doing great things in Israel. And I think, you know, having your kids know that you're proud of that and want them to share in it, that's a really great message.
I hope everybody hears you. I do want to ask you, and I say this, I say it sort of quietly. You do know, Arnie, there are some adult Jews who are parents. They don't know enough themselves. You're talking about parents who really are well-rounded in understanding themselves, Judaism and Jewish history. You know that there are many Jewish adults who are parents who are not equipped to do what you're asking them to do. And it comes back, I guess, to one of the things you mentioned earlier, that you want there to be as full and as broad and as exciting education across the Jewish spectrum. And in many ways, it's not only just the authors you just mentioned, but it's also what you've spent your career doing. You've been trying to educate American Jewry every time you speak and write. But I do want you to speak just for a moment about my point. There are many adult Jews who must know more, who must learn more, who must be better equipped to articulate issues for their children and when they're in social settings with other individuals. Speak to that for a moment.
Oh, boy, now you're going into my, this is what I do, This is my passion in life, to be a Jewish educator.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you that we are resting on our laurels as Jews because we're assuming that somehow our kids are automatically going to figure out why it's worthwhile to be a Jew and why they should take the effort and the expense to learn about their tradition and their community and become a supportive and proud Jew and then raise up another generation of Jews. And this is a false assumption. In other words, it's not in the water. It's not in the blood. And Jews existed for most of the centuries because we were separated as a community from everybody else. But in order for us to be Jews now in 21st century America, when every opportunity is open, we got to choose it. We have to choose Judaism over and over again. And we got to know what we're choosing and why and what it is. And so if parents care about Judaism and the continuity of the Jewish people, and I think most Jews do, then they have to recognize that this takes effort on their part. They have to learn some more about who we are and where we come from. And if you've got a kid going off to college, it's a great opportunity to say to that kid, bring me some books. Teach me. Transmit to me what you've learned. You went to some Hillel programs? Okay, great. Teach me something about what you've learned. You read a good book about the Jews this year? Okay, bring it home. I'd love to talk to you about it. And what a great way to connect to your kids by connecting to the books that they've been reading and the things that they've been learning. And you're absolutely right. We can't survive if we're ignorant. We've got to be a learned people. And we don't deserve this people of the book designation as much as we used to because there are many Jewish homes that don't have any Jewish books in them. And then if our kids turn out not to care much about Judaism, we can't be surprised. And if you don't know the history of Israel, then you're open to all these lies and false accusations because you just don't know. So this year, we're going to have the year upcoming, 2017. We're going to celebrate the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, and we're going to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the UN partition vote in 1947. And, of course, we're going to have the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War. We got all sorts of occasions this year for delving back into our history and the history of Israel and finding out how it really happened. That's a great opportunity. We should not miss this opportunity.
Oh, that's wonderful. You give me chills, Arnie. So we're about to go into the Jewish high holidays. I want you to end. You have a chance here. And by the way, you're not only speaking to America on JBS, we are now in Israel online. So you're really global. Everywhere in the world online, people may be watching you. What's your message for us, Arnie, as we're about to begin the high holidays?
The rabbis set up the Jewish calendar. When I say the rabbis, I mean the rabbis 2,000 years ago. They really put our tradition in the form we have it now. And they set up the Jewish calendar so every year, right before Rosh Hashanah, we read the chapters of the book of Deuteronomy called Nitzavim, which is the end of Moses' final speech. So we, as it were, get that last lecture by the great college professor right before he leaves the scene. And this is Moses' final chance to get the Israelites, the children of Israel, to hear him. And what does he say? He says these chilling words, I've set before you good and evil, blessing and curse, life and death. Choose life. And this, to me, stirs me as a Jewish human being every time I read it. What it's saying is the choice is ours. You can do good in this world, or you can do the opposite. You can choose life, or you can choose the opposite. You can make your life a blessing, or you can make your life a curse. And we're at a crossroads. We Jews and we Americans now as ever, and we got to choose life. And there's a message here, and the Jewish people, when it opted to set in motion the process of forming a state in the land of Israel, we chose life. Literally, we chose life for the Jewish people in the ashes of the Holocaust. And every time we stand up for that state and stand up for our people and our tradition, we are choosing life. And I think we're choosing good and we're choosing blessing. So let's get our act together, we Jews. Let's resolve this Rosh Hashanah that we're going to do what it takes to strengthen this community and this tradition and this precious state of Israel of ours. So I think we got a tremendous opportunity, and let's take hold of it.
Arnie, it's been wonderful talking to you. We are so lucky.
And to you.
We are so lucky to have you on the Jewish scene as one of the leading voices who really inspires not only at JTS. You have to understand, you inspire all of American Jewry and world Jewry who gets a chance to hear you. And I want to make sure JBS is a platform you use. You should be heard all the time. You're fabulous, and I thank you so much for giving me some time. And you have a Shana Tova Mituka, a sweet, happy, healthy year for you and your family, and we'll talk often.
And the same to you and all of our listeners. Thanks very much.
Thank you very, very much. There you have it, the thoughts of Arnie Eisen. He's Chancellor of JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. He teaches, he writes, and he's a voice. He's a voice that says things in a powerful, cogent, moving way, courageous way. And it was an honor to be able to bring him to you, especially as we're about to begin the high holidays together. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, editor, Dennis Golan, JBS's associate director, Dara Golub, and the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.